Okay. I am now live. This is some introductory notes on Michel Foucault's analysis of knowledge and social institutions, which he uses the term power knowledge to talk about. This is sort of middle to late career of Michel Foucault's trajectory through the end of his life. So, for Foucault, power comes before knowledge. Power is what makes knowledge happen. Power is a form of social control. Power is a form of the production of social order. So power is what creates and maintains a certain kind of, order is the best word for it, within a society. Knowledge is a method or a technique of power. But power is the driving force of knowledge. By social institutions, Foucault means a wide array of different things, including things you wouldn't think of as being institutions, like medicine. Medicine not meaning drugs, but medicine meaning the entire apparatus of medical knowledge, doctors, pharmacists, nurses, hospitals, clinics, and so on. Everything that goes into the provision of medicine or medical care for people is the institution of medicine. There's Michel Foucault. Oh, why is this man smiling? Sometimes I just don't know. I think that he was happy. I think it must have been kind of joyful to be as frickin' smart as Michel Foucault was in certain ways. He spent a lot of his life in archives, digging through especially 18th century medical and psychiatric documents having to do with whatever it was he was studying at the time, the political documents, psychiatric documents. So what counted as medical journals at the time, or books written by doctors and so forth. He would pore over these in an exhaustive way for months and months at a time. And then he would give lecture courses. He was a professor at the Collège de France, and being a professor or a chair at the Collège de France, your responsibility was to give a public lecture course, one public lecture course per year, usually I think over the course of 12 weeks or something like that. And then the rest of the time you were a researcher. So the lecture course was to present what your research had come up with. And Foucault's lecture courses were incredibly popular. They filled the room. And in fact, very soon they had to arrange for a second room where they just had speakers for people to just listen to him. It's pretty amazing. So he was a huge intellectual star in France in the 70s when he was doing this work. And then when he wasn't working for about 2 or 3 months every year, he would come to the San Francisco Bay Area and go completely mad and basically say yes to any kind of proposition that was made to him about things to put into his body. And as a result of that, he died pretty young of AIDS. So here are some major works by Michel Foucault. Those first two are from an earlier period in his work, but they had to do with how he was setting up what came later. And there is a sort of connection in theme. The Birth of the Clinic was about how medicine started to arise as an institution, hence birth of the clinic. How something like clinical medicine arose and how it became distinguished from asylums or prisons. Madness and Civilization deals with the same idea, only with regard to the distinction of madness from other kinds of reasons why we might exclude someone from the rest of society. In other words, madness was starting to become distinct from other reasons you would exclude somebody, like that they're a criminal, that they are impoverished and indigent and refuse to work, that they are disabled and not able to work, etc. Those both happened in the 18th century, and there's a reason why. Discipline and Punish, which is the book that we're going to be talking about most today, or in this video, and The History of Sexuality were later. History of Sexuality was what he was writing when he died and did not finish. It was projected to be 5 volumes, of which only the first appeared when he was alive. Discipline and Punish was subtitled The Birth of the Prison. In French, the title is really Surveillance and Punishment, Surveiller et Punir. And that's a more accurate idea in a way, but the French surveiller incorporates the idea of disciplining as well. So that's something that we're going to have to get into. So on we go. So power exists not in certain places only. That's the first thing you got to get over. We tend to think about power in terms of it belonging to certain people and being exerted upon others in a kind of oppressive way. We tend to think about power as like something that like the police force has, and they use it to mush down on a protest group or something like that. Well, that might in a way be true, but it's not the power that really gets things moving in a society. The power that is most important in a society is a constant power that puts constant pressure on a society not to repress or oppress, but a power that creates, a power that makes things happen. So Foucault was not interested in power as a form of repression, but in fact power as a force that created or that made things happen. Another way to put it is power tends to be expressed in an image like a cannon. For Foucault, a better image of power is knowledge or a social institution. And here's a great example. It's the example that he develops in Discipline and Punish, Surveiller et Punir. It's the design developed by Jeremy Bentham. If you remember him, he was the developer of the concept of the hedonic calculus and of what became utilitarianism. His was the idea of creating social reform by pursuing what would be most beneficial to most people. Now, Bentham was a very progressive thinker in the 19th century in Great Britain. Now, in Great Britain, in the 19th century, prisons were pretty shitty places where prisoners were beaten and tortured still. And Bentham proposed a more humane alternative kind of prison where instead of that kind of torturous imprisonment, he thought, let's have fewer of those kinds of oppressive and repressive sorts of power, and instead, remember what I said about Bentham's design of the prison. Instead of torturing and beating our prisoners, let's let them have their own cell, and we'll just watch them. And occasionally we'll preach to them or teach them nice lessons about good behavior. We'll treat them like human beings, not like mere animals. That was what Bentham was selling, right? Don't beat them. Don't lock them away forever in dank cells, in dungeons, which was still kind of happening in Britain at the time. No, put them in lighted places. Look at that, they got windows. Every cell has got windows. They can see light. That was new. That was a new thing and wonderful. Light, actual light, daylight. As much as they have daylight in Great Britain. And lessons that are good for their souls. Treating them like human beings. This is all great. It's all very benign. Until they screwed it up in Joliet. Successful panopticon. You're familiar with these. These are really old ones. But you still see some of them around, especially our neck of the woods. Obviously, these are traffic cameras set up with the idea that they will catch you breaking a traffic law. Will they catch you breaking a traffic law? Sometimes. Maybe not. The thing is, you don't know. The important thing about these cameras is that the existence of the camera is supposed to change your behavior. It's the existence of the panopticon. It's the always being seen, always being able to be seen, that creates the situation that you will discipline yourself. You discipline your own behavior because you can be visible. You are visible. So, the social institution, the prison, the traffic camera, creates a situation in which you become visible. Your behavior becomes visible. That visibility is what establishes power over you. That power over you is what changes your behavior. After all, when somebody's watching you, you sometimes change your behavior. Whammo! So if the projector is here, and the students are here, where are they facing? What are the students doing in these desks? Aha! What are they not doing in these desks? How are they not oriented? When are they there? How long are they there? What are they doing there? All of that is determined on the basis of their becoming. Here, very benign. We're doing such nice things for you. Because if Dad had diabetes and a heart condition, maybe you will too. These are all very good things to know about you. So, every panopticon is a technology of power and knowledge. Every panopticon is. So what does it do? It uses surveillance. That's the first thing it does. Surveillance means that it makes you visible. It makes your behavior visible. It makes you visible. It makes something about you visible. Even something that's invisible, it will make visible. In the history of sexuality, Foucault argued that sexuality had to even be invented as an idea to be made a visible thing, to be made an object and then made visible as an object, to be made something that there is a knowledge of. Otherwise, it was just sort of a some stuff people did that they got pleasure from. But no, it had to be made into a thing that we needed to know about. And then it became something that we could look at, see. And once it became something that could be seen, then we got to look at it. So once we can look at it, then we're going to look at it. And once we can look at it, then we're going to control it. That's how power works. And by looking at it and controlling it, we construct a subjectivity. And by constructing a subjectivity, what Foucault meant was we build a pattern of behavior. We build a person. We build a personality. We build a you. We build a second nature that is so, that you become so accustomed to that you identify it as you. Remember that what I was saying about your seat, right? That's the construction of subjectivity. Well, this is mine. This is my seat. That's mine. Is it? And that feeling of it being sort of a part of you has to do with this construction of subjectivity. Ultimately, how this all comes together is in the form of what Foucault called this docile body. A human body that becomes a site of power and knowledge in this institution called a school. We start to exert power and knowledge that says this is how the school day goes, this is how the run of an education goes, this is what happens in 8th grade. You go into the algebra class, you sit in this desk faces the chalkboard, this faces the white screen that pulls down from the chalkboard. I'm old. The overhead projector faces the screen. The students face the overhead projector. They read what's projected. They write down notes. All of that kind of stuff is what's normal for a docile body that's been trained over those years of schooling to do just that. And a docile body is one that just does that. Just does that. How docile are you? Remember what I said in my notes about Foucault. Only once in my now 27-year career as a teacher in colleges. Oh, crap. 32-year career as a teacher in colleges. God, I'm getting freaking old. Only once have I had to tell students to keep their hands to themselves. They were in love. It wasn't appropriate for them to share their expressions of their love at that time and place. Docile bodies or not, they were just getting too serious. Okay, so how does this happen? He refers to these technologies of docility that he calls enclosure, partitioning, functionality, interchangeableness, and technologies of time and action. So I don't want to go through this in a lot of detail, but just kind of run through this. If you think about the way any kind of institution like this works, think about what happens when you go to a doctor's appointment. You're enclosed, right? You're partitioned off from others. Your body becomes a certain kind of functional thing because it's the function of your body that is at issue. When I was going to the doctor for my headaches, my migraines, I became enclosed in the doctor's office. I was partitioned off from others. The functioning of my head was what was at issue, and I was interchangeable from others. I was just, patient number 8 or whatever. And the schedule and the rhythm and gesture of that kind of schedule, the how you do things in a doctor's office, the gestures that are appropriate in a doctor's office, all of that was part of the routine of it. right? Those are all technologies of docility. You don't go to a doctor's office and start blowing up balloons and making balloon animals and handing them out to people. Not unless you're hired to do that to make people feel happier in the doctor's office, right? You just don't do that. Or you don't go there wearing a one-man band and start banging around and playing a banjo and stuff like that. That's not what you do, and you know that. How do you know that? You've become a docile body. And your orientation among things is also docile. You know what to do with the uncomfortable seats in the waiting room. You know to sit there. You know not to stand on them. You know not to sit on them backwards. You know not to lie down across them. And the technologies of docility are exhaustive. They cover every aspect of your behavior when you're involved in these institutions. Every aspect of your behavior is covered by these technologies. It's also kind of exhausting sometimes. Okay, back to the docile body to kind of sum this up. It's made docile. You have a generalized character. Sorry, but all y'all students kind of are the same in that you all will do kind of predictably the same things with respect to the things that I do to you. You know, if I assign a paper to my students, fairly predictably, the students will write a paper more or less responding to the prompt. Yeah. Even students who cheat do so in a kind of the same way, reliably. How about that? Even cheating is docile and disciplined. It's done in the same kinds of ways. So your body, your own body, my body too, is a form of machinery or technology. It does what the institution itself, power itself, is commanding. So here are various examples. Wow. I got these from asking students to just name some. The street corner was because of the cameras, right? Supermarket's fun because if you have one of those, those accounts. Well, actually, it started with supermarkets, but now it's like every kind of store. You know, the club card or the, they all have those now. You get a discount after, so many of these things, and you get just buy $10,000 worth of stuff and you get $1 off your next purchase, all that kind of crap. They've disciplined you into using their service or buying from them. Your school transcript. Boy, I remember all the times in school that you were told this is going to go on your permanent record. That was an attempt, anyway, to discipline you to behave in a certain way. It didn't work for me either. Your credit rating is a wonderful example of a panopticon because that shit will follow you to your grave. And now it's being used. This did not happen when I was young. Now a credit rating is being used for frickin' everything. Your credit rating is being used when you're going for job interviews. That was not happening when I was a kid. Your credit rating is being consulted when you're applying to rent an apartment. Not happening when I was a kid. When I rented my first apartment in Pittsburgh when I was young, going to graduate school there, my rental deal with my landlord was pay your rent or else I'll break your legs. That is literally what my lease agreement was. He didn't check my credit rating. Schools and military, obvious examples of the panopticon. Google is a panopticon because every Google search you do, they record and use to advertise crap at you. Your medical record. This is a fun thing that happened to me. I was teaching professional ethics, and I was teaching in a unit about confidentiality and privacy. A student came to me after class one day, and he said, I wonder if you can help me with this. This is something that happened. I don't understand it. I went to work, and after work, my boss came up to me, and he said, we really got to work on your cholesterol rating. It's way too high. How did he know about my cholesterol rating? Well, it turns out that under HIPAA's privacy rule, HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Under that law, which was during the Clinton administration, that law revised the privacy rules about medical records. It also required medical records to become digitized. The privacy rule, which was touted as very, very good for the privacy of your medical records. It's also why you have those things at pharmacies that have that line on them and say you have to stand here to wait for the next available pharmacist or clerk for the sake of privacy. Under HIPAA, there is an exception if your job permits medical surveillance. His job, unbeknownst to him, because that's okay under the HIPAA privacy rule, allowed his boss to get medical surveillance, to have access to his medical record without him knowing it, because he was a supervisor in a shipping concern, and he sometimes, when there was somebody off work, might have to run a forklift. And because running a forklift requires you to, not have a heart attack and die while running the forklift, he was subject to medical surveillance. And he found out about it because his doctor, having his medical record without this guy knowing it, told him they should work on his cholesterol. How about that? Who has access to your medical record? Maybe I do. Okay. Academic discipline is also something that subjects you to the institution's power. Think about what you have to do to get your degree. You have to subject yourself to a course of study, subject yourself to university requirements. You have to subject yourself to your major's way of thinking. The more you get close to that form of power and knowledge, the more disciplined you become. When I was an undergraduate and I was thinking about getting into a PhD program, I consulted all of my undergraduate faculty, talked to all of them. One of them was not a professor. He was, like I have been my whole career at Stan State, he was a non-tenure track faculty member. He then became tenure track. Good for him. His name is Dr. Cast, Nick Cast. Back then, I did a lot of creative writing. I had a couple of plays produced back then and was involved in the literary magazine at the campus and other stuff like that. Got a couple of poems published in it. He told me this. He said, if you want to do creative writing, don't go to graduate school, because your academic career, earning a PhD, will destroy your ability to write creatively. And his reasoning was this: if you train yourself to write like an academic, you won't be able to write creatively anymore. It will kill that part of you. This is a sort of Foucault kind of explanation of that. Earning a PhD requires years of subjection to a form of discipline and surveillance. My ways of reading and writing and thinking and talking and behaving have all been reformulated. Even like gestures, hand gestures, the way people dress. Do you think that academics talk and gesture and look the way they look by accident? Hell no. they end up looking like they do, talking like they do, dressing like they do, because other people in their disciplines do. It's all about subject formation through disciplining and surveillance by others in their academic field. That is a really docile body. How about them apples? I know there weren't any apples involved, but you know what I mean. Cool stuff. Foucault is so amazing. All right, back to power knowledge. Every discourse that creates knowledge about human beings first has to constitute an object of knowledge. It has to establish that there is an object to know. Then it has to attach a discourse, a language to that object. Then it creates a body of knowledge that creates normals about that object. Foucault's work on sexuality did that. First thing it did was create sexuality as an object. One of the earliest works on that is by, what's his first name? Kraft Ebing. Hold on, I got it right here. Richard von Kraft Ebing. Psychopathia Sexualis. Published in the 19th century sometime. 18... something? 1870 something. One of the very first works on sexuality as something that you could write a science of. So sexuality became an object, and then a discourse, a scientia sexualis, a science of sexuality, was attached to it. And then normalizations came about. Kraft Ebing wrote about heterosexuality, and he called it inversion, what we now call homosexuality. There wasn't an idea of homosexuality. I'm going to repeat that. There was not an idea of homosexuality before Kraft Ebing wrote this book. There were people doing what we call homosexual behavior forever. But there weren't homosexuals because the idea didn't exist. Wow. So sexuality as a knowledge came after a certain kind of power constituted an object to know. In psychiatry, I gave you this example, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, created by the American Psychiatric Association. That is a form of power knowledge. In medicine, Foucault, along with Canguilhem, Foucault and Canguilhem have some important crossovers. The construction of a disease is an important kind of effect of a discourse. Disease is a socially constructed idea. Foucault and Canguilhem would both say that, but in different ways. What Foucault would really want us to know is that a disease has to be an object of a discourse. Nothing exists in nature as disease. Disease is something that is created as a form of knowledge. Who is diseased is decided on the basis of the establishment of power over persons' bodies and a decision about whose body is normal and whose bodies are not. and whose bodies are diseased and whose bodies are not, and what constitutes disease and what does not. So, one last picture of Foucault. Isn't that great? What is he doing? I like the idea that his hand is about to just, like, grab the top of his head and stop him. Stop me before I think again! Anyway, I love this stuff. Foucault is just, he just delights me. Every time I read Foucault, it just makes me very happy. And I don't really know why. Foucault makes other people very upset and very, sometimes very sad. And I don't get that. It's just intellectual. It's an intellectual high for me, I think. It just it just kind of tickles my brain in fun ways. And I hope that this helps explain what Foucault was doing and helps you also with some of the stuff that Canguilhem does, because there are some important similarities. Foucault is much more interested in the ways that that power produces these ideas of disease or of normal. Canguilhem is more interested in environmental and sort of an ecology of disease. And that's where the social environment becomes important. But there are some similarities in the idea that there's a sort of social determination involved in what makes disease happen. Alrighty.